We've been talking about different types of transformations, such as reflections and translations. Today we're going to talk about rotations, which means to rotate or turn an object. When I think about rotation, I think about the Earth, because the Earth rotates on its axis, which is at the South Pole or North Pole. In this picture, the axis is the South Pole. So I'm going to rotate the Earth clockwise. That's 90 degrees. So as I'm rotating it, notice that Antarctica stays towards the middle, while Australia and South America stay towards the outside. That's 180 degrees. So we know that all the way around would be 360 degrees. So if you rotate it this way, 90 degrees would be right there. 180 degrees would be halfway around. And then 90 degrees counterclockwise would be turning it this way. So here's a good example. If we have our original shape up here in quadrant 2, and we want to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, we're going to turn it this way. It's going to end up in quadrant 1. If we have our original shape and we want to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, it's going to come down here to quadrant 3. If we want to rotate it 180 degrees, it's going to end up down here in quadrant 4. Now, if you want to rotate it 180 degrees, it really doesn't matter if it's clockwise or counterclockwise. It should end up in the same place. So let's look at an example. If I want to rotate this rectangle 180 degrees, I know that it's going to end up in this quadrant down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a star in that quadrant. That way I know that's where I want it to end up. Now what I'm going to do is rotate the entire graph 180 degrees. So my star is up where my original shape used to be. Now all I have to do is graph what the original shape was. So if I go -5, 5, I'm going to pretend like this graph is just a regular graph. So I'm going to go over to -5, up to 5, then to -1, 5, then down to -1, 2, and -5, 2. So now I have this new shape, and it should be rotated 180 degrees. So now that I've drawn my shape, I need to label my points. And just like in the other transformations, you need to use prime notation. So up here we had A prime, this point over here becomes B prime. Our bottom shape, or bottom point, becomes C prime. And then over here we have D prime. So now we can rotate our shape or our graph back over to its original position and see what it looks like. Okay, so here we have our original shape with our original graph, and over here on this side we have what it would look like if you erased that original shape. As you can see, the figure was up in quadrant 1. We rotated it 180 degrees, so now it's down here, or I'm sorry, quadrant 2. Now it's down here in quadrant 4. Notice how C is the closest point to the axis in the original shape, and down here in the new shape, C is still the closest point to the axis. A was the furthest point away in the original shape, and A is still the furthest point away after our rotation. The points will stay the same distance away from the axis in the new shape as they were in the original shape. So that's a good way to check your answer. So now let's look at a triangle. We want to rotate the triangle 90 degrees counterclockwise. So we're going to put a star in the quadrant that it should end up in. Since it's in quadrant 1, it needs to go 90 degrees counterclockwise. We know it should end up right over here. So we're going to put a star there. So now all we have to do is rotate our graph to where our star is where the original shape was. So now we're going to graph our points exactly like we did the original shape. We go to 2, 5, 7, 1, and 2, 1. So now we have our new shape. Now we need to label our new shape using prime notation. So the point up here is going to be A prime. That's A prime. 7, 1 is B prime. And then 2, 1 is C prime. So now we can rotate our graph back to the original position. And we see that C is still the closest point to the axis. So I think it looks right. Another way you can look is this is 2 away, and if you think about it rotating this way, it should still be 2 places away from the x-axis, like it was from the y-axis over here. So this is what it would look like if you had your original shape and graph, and then your new shape if you erase the original object. So now you try one on your own. Graph these points and then rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. Pause your video now. Your original shape should have looked like this. So if your original shape did not look like this and you graphed it wrong, go ahead and pause your video again and regraph it, because that will affect your rotation. So what you should have done from here is looked at which quadrant you wanted to graph it in. So 90 degrees clockwise would be this way. So you should have graphed your shape in this quadrant. If you did not, go ahead and pause your video and try it again. So now you would take your graph and rotate it to where the star was over the original shape. And now you just need to draw your shape again. So -6, -2, -4, -2, -2, -4, -4, -6, and -6, -6. So your shape should have looked like this. Now you want to label your points with prime notation. You'd have A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, and E prime. So once you rotate your graph back to its original position, you should have ended up with a shape that looks something like this, with your points labeled as they are in my graph. So here's 2 problems for homework. The first one's going to be a triangle, and you need to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. Your second one is going to be a rectangle, and you want to rotate it 180 degrees.